My sister-in-law faked injuries from a car accident to manipulate my husband. But I caught her on camera and now she's facing jail time for fraud. I never expected to be spilling my heart out on Reddit, yet here I am, desperate for advice and support. I'm Nancy, 28F, and I'm currently dealing with my husband's family, notably his sister Jenny, 32F. Jenny and I have always had a rocky relationship, but recent events have pushed things to breaking point. To provide some context, I met my husband Warren, 30M, at a mutual friend's Halloween party 5 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was dressed as Wonder Woman, and he arrived as Clark Kent. We spent the entire night conversing in a secluded nook, ignoring the craziness of the party around us. We hit it off right away, bonding over our mutual love of hiking, photography and 1980s movies. I had never felt such an instant connection with anyone before. We chose to marry after 2 years of dating, which included weekend escapades, nice movie nights, and the occasional disagreement, typically about Warren's habit of leaving his socks everywhere. Our wedding was a small, personal celebration in a rustic barn, attended by close friends and family. That was when I first met Jenny. Jenny made it apparent from the moment we met that she did not like me. She arrived late for the rehearsal dinner in a white outfit that looked strangely bridal. During her toast, she spent more time reminiscing about her childhood memories with Warren than wishing us success in our marriage. She even accidentally poured red wine over my outfit during the reception. At the time, I put it down to wedding day stress and attempted to dismiss it. Jenny's behavior intensified over the months. She would make disparaging remarks about my work as a freelance graphic designer, hinting that I was not talented enough for her brother. "Oh, you're still doing that little drawing thing?" she'd ask with a condescending smile. "I thought you'd have found a real job by now." Each comment seemed like a small knife, eroding away at my self-esteem. Warren is from a close-knit family, and he has always been protective of Jenny. Jenny's parents died in a vehicle accident when she was 18, leaving her to raise Warren alone. She put her goal of becoming a nurse on hold in order to support her family with 2 jobs. I understand and admire their bond, but Jenny uses it to control Warren and disrupt our relationship. The first serious incident happened on our first wedding anniversary. Warren and I had planned a weekend retreat to a quiet mountain chalet, where we had spent our first trip together. I had been looking forward to it for months, planned hikes, picnics, and even a surprise candlelight dinner beneath the stars. Jenny called Warren in tears 2 days before we were about to depart, saying she was going through a difficult breakup and needed her brother's support. Warren, being the compassionate guy he is, proposed that we postpone our trip to be present for Jenny. I was disappointed, but I understood the circumstances. After all, family comes first, right? However, when we got to Jenny's house, we discovered her laughing and drinking wine with her friends. There were no signs of a split or sorrow. When I asked her about it later, she dismissed it, claiming she was simply feeling low and needed some companionship. "You wouldn't understand, Nancy," she murmured patronizingly, patting my arm. "Warren and I share a special bond. Sometimes I just want my lil' brother around." Warren saw nothing wrong with it, but I couldn't resist the suspicion that Jenny had purposefully thwarted our intentions. Jenny's intrusion into our life increased in frequency and severity over time. She would pop up unexpectedly to our place, usually on date nights or when Warren and I had scheduled some quality time together. She once interrupted a romantic supper that I had spent hours preparing. "Oh, did I interrupt something?" she inquired innocently, before settling into our couch and putting on the television. She would phone Warren at weird hours, claiming to have various emergencies that always seemed to be resolved by the time we arrived. One night, at 2 a.m., she called to report a gas leak in her apartment. We rushed over, only to find her quietly watching a movie, saying the scent had vanished just before we arrived. The problem came to a climax last month at Warren's 30th birthday celebration. I had spent weeks preparing a surprise party for all of Warren's friends and colleagues. I even managed to fly in his best friend from college, Mike, whom he hadn't seen in years due to their locations on separate coasts. The celebration was in full swing, with everyone enjoying the catered cuisine, open bar, and the presentation of Warren's life that I had painstakingly created. Jenny arrived an hour late, crashing into the living room while evidently intoxicated. She was holding a large gift box covered in glittering gold paper, and she proudly stated that she had the nicest present for her newborn brother. The room went silent as she demanded everyone's attention. The box contained a set of keys. Jenny proudly announced that she had purchased Warren a classic car he had long desired, a 1967 Chevrolet Impala, the very kind his father used to drive. I felt my heart fall. My own gift, a homemade picture album recording our relationship and a weekend vacation to his favorite camping spot, fell short in contrast. The room fell silent as all eyes went to Warren. I could see the conflict on his face. He was definitely moved by the gesture, but he was also concerned by the gift's extravagant nature. "Jen," he continued quietly. "This is too much. How did you afford this?" But what occurred next really stunned me. Jenny looked at me triumphantly and said, "See, this is how you show love, not with some cheap crafts and a trip to the woods." Her words struck deep, and I felt embarrassed in front of all of our guests. The room became uncomfortably quiet, and our friends shifted nervously, unsure where to look. Warren eventually spoke up, his voice strained with rage. "Jenny, that is enough. Your actions are improper and you should go." Jenny's face was distorted with wrath. She threw the keys at Warren's chest before stumbling towards me, pointing an accusatory finger. "You," she muttered, "have turned him against me. You are ruining our family." She stormed out, knocking over a vase of flowers and slammed the door so hard that a picture fell from the wall. The gathering soon dispersed after that, with guests making embarrassing excuses to go early. I was left standing in our living room, surrounded by half-finished food and deflated balloons, feeling completely dejected. Warren and I had a long, emotional chat late into the night after everyone else had left. He apologized for not standing up to Jenny sooner and pledged to establish clearer limits with her. We agreed that Jenny's behavior was harmful and that we needed to minimize our interactions with her for the sake of our marriage. But as I looked into Warren's eyes, I could sense the sorrow and turmoil. How could I ask him to choose between his wife and his sister, who had given so much for him? The next day, Warren called Jenny to discuss what had transpired. He informed her that her acts were inappropriate and that she needed to apologize to me if she wanted to remain a part of our life. Jenny refused, claiming she had done nothing wrong and that I was causing difficulties in their family. "I'm the only real family you have left, Warren," she added, her voice full with sorrow. "Don't let her take that away from you. We've reached an impasse. Warren is caught between his feelings for me and his commitment to his sister. I don't want to force him to make a decision, but I can't keep living with the continual stress and drama. I'm thinking about suggesting that we move to a different city to get some distance, but I'm concerned about Warren's reaction. Will he consider it an ultimatum? Will this merely bring him closer to Jenny? I adore my husband and want to make our marriage work, but I'm beginning to worry if it's feasible with Jenny's frequent intervention. Am I overreacting? Should I work harder to reconcile with Jenny for Warren's sake, or should I take more drastic measures to protect our relationship? Any advice is much appreciated. I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of family drama, and I'm not sure how to get back to shore. Update. It has been almost a month since my original post, and I wanted to provide an update on Jenny's situation. A lot has happened, and I'm still trying to digest it all. Thank you to everyone who gave me advice and support. It helped me get through this difficult period. Following my previous essay, Warren and I discussed Jenny's behavior and its influence on our marriage numerous times more. We decided to take a break from Jenny for a while to focus on our relationship. Warren committed to minimize his contact with her and to always communicate with me before making any plans that involved his sister. It was not an easy decision for him, and I could feel the guilt weighing on him, but he saw that it was vital for our marriage. For the first few weeks, everything was peaceful. Jenny seemed to respect our boundaries, and Warren and I were spending some much-needed quality time together. We resumed regular date evenings, which we hadn't done in months due to Jenny's frequent interruptions. We even began organizing a vacation for just the two of us, a hiking trip through multiple national parks, which we had discussed since we first started dating but had never found the time for. For the first time in a long time, I felt optimistic about the future. However, roughly 3 weeks after Warren's birthday party, events took an unexpected turn. It was a quiet Sunday evening, and Warren and I were watching a movie on the couch when his phone called. Mrs. Johnson, Jenny's neighbor, was identified on the caller ID. Warren replied, his brow pinched with anxiety. Warren's face lost color as I watched, and he jumped up abruptly, nearly knocking over his glass of wine. "We'll be right there," he stated, his voice cracking. He turned to me, his eyes wide with horror. "Jenny has been in a vehicle accident. She is at St. Mary's Hospital." The drive to the hospital was tense. Warren held the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white while I attempted to obtain additional information from Mrs. Johnson over the phone. Jenny was driving home from a bar when she lost control of her vehicle and smashed into a tree. The police suspected she was driving under the influence. We arrived at the hospital and found Jenny in the emergency department. She was conscious but definitely in pain, with her right arm in a temporary cast and tiny wounds on her face from the smashed windshield. When she spotted Warren, she burst into tears and reached for him with her good arm. "I'm so sorry," she wailed as Warren gently embraced her. I botched up so badly." I stood awkwardly to the side, divided between sorrow for Jenny's situation and annoyance that yet another crisis had interrupted our lives. The doctor informed us that Jenny had been fortunate. Aside from a fractured arm and some cuts and bruises, she had no serious injuries. However, she would require someone to care for her for a few weeks while her arm healed. Warren offered to take care of her before I could even think about what that meant. "She can stay with us," he added, looking at me pleadingly. "Just till she gets back on her feet. We cannot leave her alone like this." I wanted to object and remind him of our commitment to keep boundaries, but how could I say no in this situation? I reluctantly nodded in agreement. Jenny moved in with us the next day, and it's been a nightmare ever since. She continuously demands Warren's attention, phoning him for everything. "Warren, can you help me with my pillows? Warren, I need a glass of water. Warren, can you change the channel for me?" It's as if she's returned to a defenseless child, and Warren is only too willing to play the role of protecting Big Brother. She complains about everything. "Nancy, the stuff you cook is too spicy. Don't you realize I have a delicate stomach? The way you've set up the guest room, the sun comes in too bright in the morning. Can't you get some better curtains?" And just about anything else she can think of. I try to be patient, reminding myself that she is injured and likely in pain, but it is wearing me down. The worst part is that I am beginning to suspect Jenny isn't as helpless as she claims to be. I've noticed her using her damaged arm normally when she thinks no one is looking, like reaching for the TV remote or adjusting her hair. But the moment Warren enters the room, she returns to wincing and gripping her arm as if it were made of glass. When I conveyed this to Warren, he accused me of being neurotic and uncaring. "She's hurt, Nancy," he replied, his voice tight and frustrated. "Why can't you just be supportive?" I felt crazy. Was I truly being unreasonable, or was Jenny manipulating us both? Things escalated last night when I overheard Jenny on the phone with a buddy. I hadn't intended to eavesdrop, but as I walked past the guest room to do laundry, I heard Jenny's voice, which was especially energetic and enthusiastic. Curiosity got the best of me, so I stopped outside the door to listen. "Girl, you wouldn't believe how well this is working out," Jenny said, laughing. "I have Warren waiting for me hand and foot. He's so concerned about me that it's almost too simple." She paused to listen to her friend's response. "The arm? Oh, it scarcely hurts anymore, but they don't need to know, do they? I believe I can stretch this out for at least another month. Maybe by then I'll be able to convince Warren that he's far better off with his real family." I felt like I had been hit in the stomach. All of my concerns were confirmed in the worst conceivable way. Jenny wasn't simply taking advantage of the circumstance, she was deliberately attempting to build a wedge between Warren and myself. I am at a loss on what to do. I tried to tell Warren what I heard, but he didn't believe me. He thinks I'm just trying to get rid of Jenny, and that my animosity for her is clouding my judgment. "Why would she lie about being hurt?" he said, his voice filled with mistrust. "That doesn't make any sense, Nancy. I feel insane in my own home, watching this lady influence my husband and destroy our marriage. The vacation we had planned seems like a distant memory now. Instead of wandering through gorgeous scenery, I'm stuck in a house with a lady who appears determined to destroy my life. I'm thinking about taking a few days off to clear my mind, possibly staying with my friend Lisa, but I'm concerned about leaving Warren alone with Jenny and her influence. What if I return to discover she has entirely turned him against me? I love my spouse, but I'm beginning to question if our marriage will survive this. How can we move forward if he does not believe me? How do I compete with the bond he has with Jenny? Any advice is much appreciated. I feel like I've reached the end of my rope and have no idea what to do next. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my previous report, and Jenny's situation has taken an unexpected turn. I'd like to thank everyone who gave advice and support. It really helped me get through this difficult period. After my last update, I was at my wit's end. I couldn't continue to watch Jenny damage my marriage. Taking several commenters' advice, I decided to collect actual evidence of Jenny's deceit. I know many of you recommended against it, citing privacy concerns, but I felt I had no choice. I installed a covert camera in the living room. I told myself it was only for a few days, just to show to Warren that I wasn't hallucinating. Within 2 days, I had convincing evidence that Jenny used her wounded arm regularly when Warren was not around. I caught her lifting heavy books, fixing her hair, and even opening a tight jar lid with the arm she said was too painful to use. The true shock came when I recorded a chat between Jenny and one of her friends who had come to visit. Jenny blatantly criticized me, calling me gullible and boasting about how simple it was to deceive Warren. "He's always been a sucker for the damsel in distress act," she told me. "A few crocodile tears and he's putty in my hands." I felt horrible listening to it, but I knew I'd found the proof I needed. With shaking hands, I transferred the tape to a USB drive and waited for Warren to return home from work. When Warren came, I sat down and told him what I'd done. He was outraged at first, accusing me of invading Jenny's privacy, but I begged him to simply view the films. His face turned pale as he saw a film of Jenny using her arm normally and heard her taunting words. "I can't believe this," he said quietly, his voice scratchy. "Why would she do this?" I had no response for him, but I felt a flood of relief wash over me. Warren could now see the truth. Warren confronted Jenny in the evening. The subsequent argument was fierce and difficult to watch. Jenny first denied everything and accused me of doctoring the footage. But when confronted with overwhelming facts, she broke down. Jenny acknowledged, through tears, misrepresenting her injuries and attempting to separate us. She discussed feeling abandoned when Warren married and her dread of losing the only family she had left. Jenny had never shown me this side of herself before: vulnerable, terrified, and extremely insecure. Warren, split between rage and concern for his sister, urged Jenny to leave our home immediately. She begged him to let her stay, pledging to reform, but Warren stood firm. "You need help, Jenny," he continued, his tone stern but not harsh. "Professional assistance, and until you respect our marriage, you are not welcome here." Jenny left that night, amidst tears and recriminations. The house felt strangely quiet after she left. Warren and I sat in silence for a long time, absorbing the day's events. Warren finally turned to me and apologized. "I'm so sorry, Nancy," he replied, his eyes overflowing with regret. "I should have believed you. I should have seen what was happening." We talked late into the night about trust, family, and the future of our marriage. Things remained tense for a few weeks, but they gradually improved. Warren went to therapy to sort out his confusing feelings about his relationship with Jenny. We also began couples counseling to repair the trust that had been broken and enhance our marriage. Then, approximately a month ago, we got unexpected news. Jenny had been arrested for fraud. Apparently, she was running a small-scale Ponzi scheme, defrauding friends and acquaintances of their cash. The classic automobile she had given Warren for his birthday. Warren was heartbroken after purchasing the item with stolen money. He felt bad for not recognizing the warning flags earlier and for maybe enabling Jenny's actions over time. I did my best to encourage him during this difficult period, reminding him that Jenny's actions were entirely her responsibility. We've now discovered that Jenny's deceptive behavior stretched far beyond our relationship. She had a history of abusing people's trust and sympathy for personal benefit. It was a difficult realization, but it helped Warren recognize that her actions were not his fault. This entire event has put our marriage to the test. There are times when trust difficulties return, when one of us retreats into our own thoughts, but we're working through them together. We've learned to communicate more openly and rely on one another for assistance. We're still processing what's happened, but we're doing it together. Warren has resolved to entirely remove himself from Jenny until she seeks proper help and makes sincere atonement. It's been difficult for him, but he knows it's vital for our well-being. We're focusing on healing and progress. We postponed our vacation and are looking forward to spending uninterrupted time together. There is still a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in a long time, I am cautiously hopeful about our prospects. Update 3. It has been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some concluding thoughts on this chapter of our lives. Warren and I have made considerable progress in our relationship. Couples counseling has been really beneficial, teaching us improved communication skills and how to support one another during stressful situations. We had to relearn how to trust one another, which wasn't always easy. There have been disagreements, times of uncertainty, and nights spent sleeping in different rooms. However, we've rediscovered the love and connection that brought us together in the first place. Warren has persisted with his individual treatment, working through his complex emotions toward Jenny and his background. He's had to face some difficult truths about his childhood and the relationship between him and his sister. It has been terrible for him, but I can see him becoming stronger and more self-aware with each passing week. Jenny pleaded guilty to the fraud charges and is now serving a 2-year sentence. Warren debated whether or not to attend her trial, but eventually opted against it. He wrote her a letter explaining his decision and expressing his hope that she will utilize this time to ponder and seek the assistance she requires. We haven't had direct touch with Jenny since she went to prison, but we did get a letter from her about a month ago. She apologized for her behavior and the anguish she had caused us. She added that she has been diagnosed with many mental health concerns and is now receiving appropriate therapy. While the letter appears earnest, Warren and I are wary about getting our hopes up. We've agreed that if Jenny displays persistent long-term change following her release, we'll explore gradually restoring our relationship with her. But for now, we're keeping our distance. On a bright side, Warren and I finally went on the vacation we had planned. We spent 2 weeks hiking and camping in national parks, reconnecting with each other and the mutual interests that drew us together in the beginning. There were tensions, old scars emerging in quiet moments around the campfire, but also moments of joy, of rediscovering one another away from the stresses of our daily lives. We've also taken important decisions about our future. We plan to relocate to a new city next year for a fresh start. Warren has been offered an excellent work opportunity, and I'm delighted about the prospects for my freelance business in a new market. We both believe that a change of environment will allow us to put the turmoil of the past behind us and focus on creating our lives together. Looking back, I realize how this difficult experience has ultimately enhanced our marriage. We've learned to stand together in the face of external demands, to instinctively trust each other, and to prioritize our partnership at all times. Warren has developed tremendously, learning to set appropriate boundaries and spot manipulative conduct, even from close ones. Personally, I've learned to trust my instincts and speak up when something feels wrong. I've also discovered the value of patience and understanding, particularly when dealing with complex family dynamics. Although the trip has been arduous, I am grateful for where it has taken us. Warren and I are closer than ever, and we are cautiously optimistic about what the future holds. We know there will always be obstacles, but we are better prepared to confront them together. Thank you to everyone who has followed our story and provided support along the way. Your guidance and encouragement have been helpful. Here is to fresh beginnings and healthier connections. Now, for the next story. I caught my wife cheating with an old fling on a hike. Turns out, she and her friends had been secretly using him for thrills behind my back. I, Ali, 38, am currently on a camping hiking trip with my wife Liv, 36, and 3 other married couples, Dom and Kate, Sean and Sarah, Bill and Miranda, as well as Liv's longtime friend Ian, 38, and his boyfriend OD, whose real name is Orlando, and no, he was not named after the dog from Garfield. We're all in our mid-30s to early 40s and enjoy spending time outside. We've been wanting to go on this hike for a while. We camp at night and walk throughout the daytime. Everything was great until early evening on the 3rd day of our 8-day journey. We stopped to camp and my wife and I decided to explore the surroundings. We discovered a little waterfall feeding into a creek that followed the trail we had been trekking. It was roughly 5 feet tall and flowed largely onto rocky rocks below. My wife stated that she wanted to rinse off in the stream and waterfall but did not want to soak her clothes. I urged her to go for it because we weren't far from the others and the location was secluded enough. I responded, "If you make it quick you could be in and out in no time." She did exactly that, lingered for a moment before stepping out and air drying with a tiny towel. Ian arrived unexpectedly from behind some trees after she had quickly put her shorts and panties back on. My wife was still topless. Here's where everything got weird. Neither of them responded. She proceeded to dress casually, and Ian approached as if he had seen her naked 100 times before. He told us that Dom wanted us to know something, but I can't remember what. My wife and Ian exchanged small talk before we all headed back to camp. It is now day 5. The hiking track leads to a small town, where we want to spend the night at a local inn to rest, resupply supplies and recover. For the past 2 days, I've been thinking about what happened at the waterfall. I tried to keep my thoughts hidden, but my wife questioned me this morning why I was so quiet yesterday. I told her I was weary, but in reality, I can't stop thinking about something that happened between her and Ian previously. I would normally be less skeptical, but I know Ian is not gay. I've known him for around 8 years and consider him a friend. We husbands and OD are the outliers in this group, as the 4 wives and Ian have been buddies since college. I've asked my wife before if she's ever dated Ian, and she's always responded no. I also inquired if Ian and any of the other ladies in the group had ever been in a relationship, and she denied that too. I might be delusional, but their relationship felt too similar, especially since she was still topless. My wife is usually very conservative about her body, so her lack of reaction to Ian's presence struck me as odd. I have no tangible reason to believe anything is wrong, but I can't shake the sensation that there's more to their history than friendship. Am I being paranoid? Or is this a red flag? I am really trying not to leap to conclusions. Update 1. It's early morning on day 6 and I wanted to give you all an update. I told my wife Liv about what happened at the waterfall. I wanted to talk to her while we still had some privacy before heading back out on the trail, and I'm glad I did. I started as non-confrontational as possible, simply remarking that it seemed strange that she wasn't concerned by Ian's presence despite the fact that she was topless. If she had responded in any other way, I would have dropped it, but she became really defensive immediately. Is this why you've been moody? It's not a huge deal. Everyone has seen breasts before, including Ian. You have to grow up. This truly alarmed me. She rarely reacts forcefully until she feels bad about something. I probed harder and she grew more reactionary and defensive, attempting to deflect and belittle every question I posed, with a dash of gaslighting thrown in. I finally had enough and told her, either tell me what's going on or I'm going to confront Ian, who you know won't lie. This is when Liv revealed that she and Ian had a previous sexual relationship. I became enraged and demanded to know why she lied to me after I had previously asked her about it. She claimed she did not lie. They never dated. It was simply an FWB, friends with benefits situation before we became formal. I asked her, startled and agitated, so you were sleeping with him when we first started dating? She retorted, you don't have to be so vulgar. I don't want to discuss this right now. Can't we have this conversation when the trip is over? I said, absolutely not. Either you tell me everything now, or I'll start interrogating your pals. I believe she saw how serious I was and decided to reveal the whole truth. The first part I already knew. She had a string of bad relationships and dating encounters. Liv ascribed a large portion of this to not getting to know the other person before leaping into bed with them. When we started dating, she asked if we could take it slow. I accepted since I was also seeking for something unique and I was extremely intrigued in Liv. She said I could date others until we chose to be official, but I told her I didn't want to date around and preferred to focus on one relationship at a time. She stated it made her really happy. Then she divulged something that would shock everyone if it became public. Liv, Kate, Miranda, and Sarah all had comparable FWB situations with Ian while dating their current husbands. Kate, who is now married to Dom, became fed up with dating the wrong guys shortly after graduation. During this time, she and Ian became FWB. When she met Dom, she urged that they take it slow and get to know each other before becoming intimate. Kate stated it was simple because she was still sleeping with Ian, meeting her sexual needs while focusing on the emotional part with Dom. Ian was happy with the arrangement, assuring her that it was all about finding her special someone. They would talk about Dom and sleep together, and when Kate realized she had found the one, they ended the FWB arrangement and she began her sexual relationship with Dom. They eventually got married. Kate later informed the other women about their agreement. Throughout the years, they each used Ian as a surrogate while looking for the one. I'm only the most current individual involved in this circumstance. I asked Liv to explain her role. The other women's marriages are their own business, but I was curious how this worked out for her. She informed me that after her former lover had too many narcissistic characteristics, she had had enough and wanted to meet a good guy, which I suppose was me. She asked Ian to help her in the same manner he had helped the other three. Ian agreed, explaining that the whole affair was about finding her a life partner. I feel he was sincere in everything. He's a free-spirited type of person. I've had serious chats with Ian, and he's the type of person that will help anyone with anything. We play golf together and he has been in my life since I began dating Liv. I didn't realize he was so involved. Essentially, he would listen, offer counsel, and talk through her emotions so she could wait until she felt comfortable with me. I felt like throwing up. It feels like the entire relationship was a lie. Despite this, I continued to seek answers. I asked when she quit seeing Ian. She claimed it was when we became official. I told her that I thought we were formal when we agreed to date, so I asked her when she considered us official. She explained, dating does not constitute two people as a couple. When you asked me to commit and we had our first intercourse, we were official. She stated that she and Ian had been strictly platonic since that night. I mentioned, that was 7 months into dating. So you've been sleeping with him for 7 months? She became silent and I knew the answer. I said, let me be clear. I would pick you up for a date and we would go out and have a great time, holding hands, cuddling, kissing and making out. Then I'd drop you off and you'd meet Ian, sleep with him and brag about what a terrific person I am? She retorted, don't make it sound so dirty. I was appalled. I wanted to run but we were in the middle of nowhere and there was no way out except to keep walking forward. In retrospect, I wish I had just left, but instead I probed for more information. I inquired, when you say you slept together, do you mean you used him just to get yourself off, or do you mean you did all the positions, foreplay and kinky things that we do? She became very silent again. I gently stated, you must answer my questions. I need to know, and I will find out, whether it is from you or one of them. With that, I motioned towards the other rooms. She answered slowly, all of it, maybe even more than with you. The room began spinning, but I asked the dreaded question, when? When was the last time? She said, the night before our first time together. I'd never wanted to leave someone more than I did at that moment, yet all I could do was sit there in shock. She attempted to console me, but I ordered her to stay away. I needed time. With nowhere else to go, I gathered some blankets and pillows and slept on the floor at the foot of the bed. I passed out for a few hours, but I'm now up and making this update. I want to march out of here, but there's a 12-passenger van at the end of the route that I don't have the keys for. I'll have to stay with these people for another 2.5 days, with another half-day travel back. I do not know what to do. Part of me can understand the reasoning, but largely I'm heartbroken and believe our entire relationship was a scam. I feel like a silver medalist, not a champion. I also have an intense need to share everything with everyone, because all of these other guys are in the same circumstance. We are all here on false pretenses. I do not know what to do. I have about 1 hour till everyone gets up and then I'll have to face Ian and my wife. Am I overreacting? Is this marriage worth saving? I do not see how we can go back. Update 2. I'm back in the comfort of my own house. Unfortunately, I and several others may be facing divorce. I was able to keep it together for the majority of day 6, but I'm sure everyone could tell something was up with me. I remained quiet and pushed myself to get back to the van. I guess Liv grabbed Ian aside about lunchtime and told him what I knew. After that, Ian began attempting to buddy up with me and converse, despite my request that he leave me alone. He persisted a couple more times before I snapped and told him to stop it in a very strong manner. Liv intervened, and they both took the hint. I needed more time to process. The next 24 hours went relatively smoothly. Everyone just kind of left me alone. However, after snapping at Ian, his temperament altered dramatically. He shifted from his customary laid-back demeanor to becoming slightly distant with everyone. He would occasionally make subtle passive-aggressive remarks, nothing too explicit, but clearly intended at me. By the 7th night, we had set up camp, and I had relaxed a little, being more friendly with everyone. We were sitting around the campfire, finishing up the last of our meals. People were conversing, joking and sharing stories. Billy told a long embarrassing story from high school. It was a very humorous story about him and his first girlfriend, and he acted like an idiot. When he was done, he said something like, "I still can't believe I was ever that dumb. I still cringe just thinking about it." Ian responded, "Well, at least you grew up. Some people never grow up and overcome their past." He then stared at me with the most disdainful expression. In that time, I experienced an out-of-body experience and saw only crimson. The filter was gone and logic was out the window. It was on. You know, Ian, you are right. Sometimes we just have to face the past head on. Liv attempted to interrupt, but I disregarded her totally. How about we address the fact that you used to have **** all our wives while we were dating? When I stated it, even the insects were quiet. Oh fellas, didn't you know either? Yeah, while they were holding out on us to make a connection, I air quoted, our future spouses were using Ian here as their human dildo. Dom and Billy seemed perplexed and angry. Sean had a look on his face like he'd just walked in on his grandmother fapping, complete train disaster astonishment. But I wasn't finished. I turned to Dom. It was Kate who devised this incredible strategy. She realized that the secret to developing a long-term relationship was to take things slowly and get to know each other before getting into bed. All you need to deal with the impulses is a best friend who will blow your back out when you get home from your dates all hot and bothered. Dom jumped in at this time. F*****Ku Ali. How do you know this? Oh, I just found out 2 days ago that when I took Liv out for drinks, that wasn't going to be the only thing she was swallowing that night. At this time, Liv lost control and began yelling at me. Why the F**** are you doing this? You don't have to. However, she was cut short when Sean stood up. It is true. It is entirely true. Everyone fell silent and glanced at him. I have known since we were dating. I didn't realize it was also true for everyone else until after we got married. I apologize, Billy. I swear I didn't realize it was you too back then. Billy's expression was one of dread. Sean, we used to have double dates with Miranda and Sarah. We went out several times and then dropped them off at Ian's. Does that imply they? Sean simply stared at him and nodded. I quickly turned to Ian. 2 at once, you hound dog. Then in a fit of bravery, I howled like a wolf. Which in retrospect is pretty terrible, but at the time, I thought it was funny. Arguments broke out among the couples all around us, but an audible gasp and whimper caught everyone's attention. OD sat there, tears spilling down his face. He looked at Ian and said, "Lies. More lies. It never ends. You always do this to me, no matter how much I forgive or how many times I return your affection." He then slapped Ian and bolted down the trail. Ian ran after him. The other three couples mumbled under their breath at each other, then began walking away in different directions. I stood beside the fire, feeling triumphant. Liv approached me and said, "I hope you're happy." I looked her in the eyes and replied, "I've never been more *****ing happy with myself in my whole life. I'm currently 80/20ths on obtaining a divorce." I suggested we postpone any major debates until we were home, unpacked, showered and nourished, because the only thing she would achieve before then is push me to my limits. At that instant, she turned and entered our tent. The following day was the most embarrassing 7 hours of my life. Between the morning pack-up, the hike to the van, loading up and the 4.5-hour journey home, only around 19 words were spoken. Now I'm sitting in my bathroom, newly showered. I'm going to eat some chicken nuggets, drink 3 Dr. Peppers and then converse with my wife. I'm not sure where we're headed from here, or where anyone else will wind up, but I know it won't be pretty regardless. Update 3. It's been 4 weeks since we returned from our trip and everything seems to have crumbled. Dom and Kate are getting divorced. They have been together the longest of the couples and have a 10-year-old son. Dom took the revelation quite hard. In addition to being together the longest, they also had the longest courtship period, 9 months. It's been a difficult pill for him to chew because he remembers they didn't truly got intimate until he began to wonder if he wanted to stay in the relationship. Now that he knows the truth, no matter what Kate says, he will always believe the delay was due to her desire to continue being with Ian. I sat down with Sean and had a couple beers one night. Despite the fact that we just met through our wives, we've been very close friends over the years. Sean stated that Sarah was straightforward with him when they began dating. She informed him she intended to wait at least 3 months before having sex, but that she would still meet with her FWB. Sean liked her but told her he was simply casually dating until he knew for sure, which Sarah was fine with. So, unlike the rest of us, Sean had a clear decision. Sean discovered he was falling for Sarah 2 weeks before the 3-month period ended, following a few double dates with Billy and Miranda. He informed her he wanted to be exclusive. She broke the 3-month limit and they became intimate that night and haven't looked back. Both were completely honest about their adventures at this time, and it appears that their candor paid off handsomely. Sean informed me they had a brief dispute after the campfire incident because Sarah felt they should have excused themselves rather than getting involved, but they are doing well as a couple overall. I've also got an update on Billy and Miranda. They are in the initial stages of reconciliation. Billy is clearly and understandably struggling. He believes she cheated and uses words to excuse it. They dated for 6 months before getting married, and they have 3 children under the age of 7, so they both believe they must try to make it work for the kids. Billy's toughest challenge is recalling dropping both Miranda and Sarah at Ian's on 2 consecutive occasions, knowing she had a threesome arranged. It reduced him to a shell of his former self. Miranda appears to have attempted to explain that they only did something on one of those nights, and it was more akin to a reverse train than a full threesome. Once again, semantics are used as an excuse. Sean assures me Miranda is speaking the truth, because Sarah was the second party and acknowledged it wasn't a true 3-way. But honestly, does it matter? Ian reached out to apologize. I told him to **** himself, then blocked him. OD also reached out. I guess my revelation was the final straw for him. We have actually talked quite a bit over the last few weeks. We actually talked a lot over the course of a week, despite the fact that we had previously merely been cordial acquaintances. It turns out that Ian and OD had been on and off for 15 years. Ian presents a laid-back, selfless appearance to everyone else, but OD knows him to be incredibly self-centered and manipulative. Ian frequently breaks up with OD for brief periods of time or claims they are on a break so he can do whatever he wants without being labeled a cheater, only to return once he has had his pleasure. Looking back, OD sees that at least 2 of these breaks occurred during these dating situations. However, OD is the most upset since he has tolerated it for so long and has given Ian numerous opportunities. He says this was the final straw. He's returning to Santa Barbara and leaving Ian and the cold, nasty Midwest behind for good. Despite our exhaustion after the hike, Liv and I had the longest chat. I informed her right away that I was not interested in arguing, disputing, or anything like that. I said, "Tell me everything you want to tell me. I will not interrupt or ask questions until you finish, then I demand the exact same courtesy. She agreed. Her letter was filled with apologies and explanations. She would admit it was wrong, then explain why it was okay or point to a positive conclusion. She expressed her disappointment and hurt with how I behaved at the campsite, but she also realized that Ian deserved equal culpability for poking the bear. When she finished, she asked if I had any questions. I replied, no. And then I began. I informed her that our entire relationship is based on false pretenses. I can see where you were coming from and why you tried the entire FWB thing. Your 3 best friends did it and scored excellent husbands before you. But on some level, all 4 of you had to understand that starting a relationship like this was wrong. It was tremendously distressing to learn that you were sleeping with someone else while we were getting to know each other, and I believe it impeded the natural progression of our relationship. I added, it has significantly altered my memory of our early days together. Do you remember that fantastic day we had approximately 4 or 4.5 months into our relationship? We spent the day together. It finished with us back on my couch, kissing, your shirt off, and me caressing you over your shorts. It was getting quite hot. You paused and apologized, stating you wanted to but weren't quite ready. You needed to be absolutely certain. I assured you that everything would be fine, and you gazed at me affectionately, kissed me passionately, and then departed. I stopped before saying, I can only guess you left my place and went to Ian's. As she nodded, tears streamed down her face. I said, I invested that energy in you. You chose to give it to someone else rather than returning it to me. I might have been able to get over this if it had ended in the 1st or 2nd month, when we were more relaxed. But after that, we spent a lot of time together and you maintained your relationship with him until the day before we became official. You enjoyed having us both. You did whatever mental gymnastics were required to justify it to yourself. I told her, you may not realize it, but this last portion is the toughest part of it all for me. Learning that you were far more adventurous and exciting with him is like a dagger to the heart. It makes me feel like I'm second best, like I'm the retirement plan you choose, just good enough. She interjected saying, no, not like that, I love you. He was only having sex, it was not real. That's how it is when they don't matter. It's simpler to be free and wild then. And so on. I waited for her to finish before saying, remember, we agreed it was my turn to talk. Afterward I remarked, I see your point of view, but it is not mine. As your husband, I believe it is my responsibility to give you my full energy, emotional, physical, cerebral, and sensual. I believe I have accomplished this during the past 8 years. I believe you have given me your best in some areas, but I now see I have not received your best in others. And as a male, I have to acknowledge that sensuous energy is really essential to me. The fact that you did not trust me with all of your sensual energy was the determining factor. I do not think I can recover from this, and I want to file for divorce. The scene became chaotic from there. She started crying hard, asking, giving herself and pleading with me to start over. I eventually removed myself from the situation. Later, she mentioned that we were just in an emotional state right now and that I needed to give it some time. This gave me pause, and I agreed to her terms of 3 weeks. As I previously stated, it has been 4 years, and my feelings have been consistent. We met with a joint divorce lawyer, who will represent both of us. There are no children involved and we both want to sell the house, so the initial meeting went smoothly. She has been tremendously depressed, as have I, but this is for the best. Sometimes things simply don't work out. Thank you very much. Now, for the next story. When my son confessed his hidden feelings, our once simple relationship became irreparably complicated. On a calm evening, our quiet neighborhood was bathed in a beautiful orange glow as the sun started to drop behind the hills. The radio was humming softly in the background while I was in the kitchen making dinner. Eric, my son, had recently spent the weekend at home after attending college. The house exuded a serene, cozy vibe, the kind of tranquility that comes from familiarity. Eric had matured so rapidly. He was a child who followed me around the home and asked me a ton of questions about life, and it seemed like it was only yesterday. At 21, he had changed from the young boy I had known to a strong, self-assured, and occasionally unwittingly aloof young man. As he grew older, our relationship had changed, and I was still getting used to it. I called him from the living room when dinner was ready. He glanced at me as we sat at the table and I noted that it was different, intense, and caused me to halt. At first I dismissed it as a figment of my imagination. We discussed how much he missed home, his classes, and his friends. But something I couldn't quite describe was evoked in me by the way he spoke and the way his eyes stayed on mine longer than normal. As we used to do frequently before he departed for college, we made the decision to watch a movie together after supper. The soft cushions and low lighting made the living area feel cozier than normal, which was ideal for a peaceful evening in. I couldn't recall the last time we spent an evening together in such tranquility. I noticed how he had matured into himself as the film went on, and I found myself looking at him more than I should have. He had grown into a man instead of the child I had reared. He moved closer to me on the couch just as I was starting to have a weird feeling of anxiety about the things that were going through my head. I initially believed it to be harmless, but then his hand touched mine. Something electrifying, something I knew I shouldn't feel, sparked through me. Startled by the intensity of the moment, I swiftly withdrew my hand. "What's wrong, Mom?" he said in a quiet, almost worried voice. Unsure of what to say, I stared at him with my heart pounding. I tried to brush the emotion aside and hoped he wouldn't notice our tension. "Nothing, sweetie, just tired, that's all," I said. However, I was aware that something had shifted at that very instant that we couldn't ignore. The distinction between mother and son had become hazy, and although neither of us had crossed it, there were many unsaid ideas in the air. The movie was playing in the background while we sat there in quiet, but neither of us was listening. I told him I had to get to bed early and got up, but as I was leaving, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something had changed between us. That night, as I lay in bed, my thoughts were racing. I knew I couldn't allow this emotion to intensify. For the benefit of both of us, I had to stay away. But I secretly didn't know how. I felt uneasy when I woke up the following morning. I kept thinking about what had happened the night before. I made an effort to dispel the sensation by telling myself it had all been in my imagination. Nothing more, nothing less, than I was his mother. I had a profound love for him, but not in a way that would ever be interpreted incorrectly. I convinced myself that I was acting irrationally. By the time I made it downstairs, Eric was already up and enjoying a cup of coffee at the kitchen table. He smiled at me as like nothing had occurred. Perhaps it had been nothing at all, simply a strange moment that only I had observed. I made the decision to ignore it for the time being. "Morning," I responded, attempting to sound as regular as possible while feigning a grin. "Morning, Mom," he said in a relaxed and informal tone. "I was considering taking a hike later. Would you like to accompany me? A trek?" We hadn't done anything like that together in a very long time. After how I felt last night, I briefly considered whether I should spend more time alone with him. However, I later told myself that it was just a mother and son hanging around. That was perfectly okay. "Sure," I replied. "It sounds nice." We traveled to a neighboring path later that afternoon, a location we had visited frequently when he was smaller. For that instant, the sky was a vivid blue, the air was clear, and everything seemed normal. We strolled alongside each other, discussing nothing specific, just our shared past experiences, his future ambitions and the typical small talk. I started to giggle, felt more comfortable around him and wondered if I had overreacted the previous evening. However, there were times when we stopped talking as we continued on the trail, leaving a lingering silence that felt heavier than it should have. At one point, Eric stopped walking and turned to face me when we came to a clearing with a stunning view of the valley below. He added, "You've always been there for me, Mom," in a quiet but earnest tone. "I don't know what I'd do without you." His tone was vulnerable, and there was something about the way he said it that surprised me and made my heart hurt. I tried to brighten the situation by smiling. "Well, you won't have to worry about that anytime soon," I laughed. "I'm not going anywhere." He was not amused. As an alternative, he moved closer and met my gaze. His words, "No, I mean it," went on. "You have never been just my mother. You've been something and everything." I went cold. I wasn't prepared for the weight and significance of the words that hung in the air. There was something in his eyes that made my pulse race again, just like the previous evening, but I looked for any indication that he was merely being sentimental or that this was an innocent moment of adoration. "Eric," I whispered in a voice that was hardly audible above a whisper, "you know how much I love you, right?" "Of course," he said, taking another step toward her. "I love you too, more than you realize." My heartbeat accelerated. This was not the proper way for a mother and son to look at one another or speak. My body felt immobile, even though my head begged me to take a step back and create some distance between us. I said, "I think we should head back," in a trembling voice. "It's getting late." However, he stretched out and softly touched my hand before I could move away. Even though the touch was harmless, I couldn't help but feel sick to my stomach because of the way he held on and the way his thumb softly touched my skin. "Mom," he whispered quietly, with a tone that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I've been feeling something. Something I shouldn't be feeling. But I'm not sure how to put it. I believe you felt it as well. I was filled with panic. With my heart thumping in my chest, I withdrew my hand and stepped back. I said, "Eric, stop," in a shaky voice. "That's not what you mean. You're perplexed." His face was a mixture of hurt and bewilderment as he gazed at me. "Mom, I'm not confused. I am aware of my feelings." "No," I replied with a headshake. "This is incorrect. My son is you. We are unable to." I was unable to continue the phrase because it felt too heavy and risky to say aloud. Eric inhaled deeply, emotion obscuring his features. "I am aware. I can't help how I feel, even though I know it's wrong. Additionally, I don't believe you can." I fought to maintain my calm as tears filled my eyes. This was not taking place. This cannot be taking place. Before things progressed further and we crossed a line we would never be able to go back, I had to put an end to this. I broke my voice as I said, "I'm your mother. I also adore you, but not in that way. We can't. I can't." Thick and oppressive, the words hovered between us. His shoulders slumped in defeat, and I could see the sorrow in his eyes. He nodded slowly while down at the floor in embarrassment. "I apologize," he muttered. "I had no intention of. I didn't want to cause you any discomfort." I took a deep breath, attempting to suppress the tumultuous mixture of feelings churning within me. Though I wasn't positive, I answered quietly, "It's okay," and suggested that we simply head home. The silence on the way home felt oppressive. We both remained silent, Eric and I. Every second felt excruciatingly long because of the weight of what had been said on the trail hanging between us. My mind was racing as I tried to comprehend what had just transpired, but I kept my eyes on the road. His confession of feelings and the words that came out of his mouth astounded me. Everything I believed to be true about our relationship seemed to have been completely turned upside down. Upon arriving at the driveway, Eric murmured that he was heading to his room. He vanished up the stairs, and I did nothing to stop him. My body shook with the feelings I had been suppressing since the trail moment, and I fell onto the couch. I had no idea how to interpret any of it. He was my baby boy, my kid, but he was no longer a boy, and it was becoming frighteningly obvious that our connection had become more complicated than either of us had anticipated. The way he had looked at me and the way his palm had lingered on mine told me otherwise, even though I wanted to think that his feelings were only a phase, something temporary that would pass with time. I experienced a feeling of guilt, like if I had done something wrong. Perhaps I had been too close, too loving over the years. However, it wasn't correct, was it? It was expected of mothers to care for, love and support their sons. I had only ever done that. However, the odd tension that had developed between us now poisoned everything, and I was at a loss for how to resolve it. I tried to avoid him for the remainder of the day by keeping myself occupied with household tasks and anything else that would take my mind off of my feelings of perplexity. I was emotionally spent by the time evening arrived. Though I knew I couldn't escape it indefinitely, I didn't want to face what had happened. Eric and I couldn't continue acting as though nothing was wrong when it was so obviously not. I had been lying in bed for hours that night when I heard someone knock on my door. My heart fell. I recognized him. "Mom, can I come in?" Eric said in a quiet, almost tentative tone. My mind was screaming at me to say no, to put some distance between us, but I hesitated. But I knew I couldn't ignore him any longer. Despite how uncomfortable it was, I had to confront this. "Come in," I whispered softly as I sat up in bed and pulled the blankets up over my head, hoping that they would protect me from the impending mental storm. Eric entered, appearing just as torn and uncertain as I was. For a minute, unsure of what to do with himself, he stood at the edge of the room. He sat down on the bed's edge after a few seconds, but he remained at a distance. He said, "I'm sorry," in a regretful tone. What I said previously wasn't appropriate. I'm not sure what happened to me. Trying to think of the perfect words, I nodded slowly. "What happened earlier, Eric, that can't happen again," I added, acknowledging that this was confusing. "We must exercise caution. Things aren't meant to be this way." "I know," he said in a whisper, his eyes sad. "But Mom, it's really difficult. I have no idea why I feel this way. I've made an effort to ignore it, but it keeps returning." I was deeply affected by what he said. I was overcome with sadness. For him. For us both, really. I never thought I would find myself in this predicament, but here we were, caught in a maze of feelings that neither of us could unravel. I repeated, "I'm your mother," in a soft yet forceful voice. "I can only ever be that. You are aware of that, aren't you?" He nodded despite the agony in his eyes as he stared at me. "I know," he replied. I don't want to lose you. You're not going to lose me, I told him. But we need to establish limits, Eric. This is risky territory. There was silence between us for a moment. Though there was still the tension from earlier in the day, there was also an implicit awareness that things couldn't go on as they were. Even though neither of us wanted to admit it completely, we both knew it. I gently said, perhaps it would be best if you returned to school tomorrow. I think we both need some space to clear our heads. I could see the sadness in Eric's eyes, yet he nodded slowly. Yeah, he muttered. Maybe you're right. The air between us was heavy with unresolved emotions as I watched him pack his belongings the following morning. I wanted to give him a hug and reassure him that everything would be all right, but after everything that had transpired, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. The house felt more empty than it had in years when he eventually left. I tried to take it all in as I sat on the couch and gazed out the window. It wasn't any easier, even though I knew that setting some distance between us was the best decision for both of us. A mother and son's connection should be straightforward and unadulterated, but ours had devolved into something much more complex that neither of us could manage. I made an effort to get back into my routine as the days went by, but it wasn't the same. Without Eric, the home felt too quiet, and I was thinking about him more than I should have. I hoped that the distance would be beneficial and that it would allow us both the time we needed to work through our emotions. However, I knew in my heart that things would never return to how they were. We couldn't reverse the change that had occurred between us, and I wasn't sure what was ahead for us. Now, for the next story. My coworker asked Maine to be her man of honor when I politely declined. She had an intense reaction. Did I miss something important? Yesterday was my first day back to work after being off for 2 weeks. This is kind of important. One of my coworkers had gotten engaged the week before I left. When she announced at work, we all did the congratulations and happy for her type of things. I thought it was over. So when I left for vacation, the last I knew, no plans had yet been made. Then yesterday when I went back to work, my boss Kim and best friend Laura said that coworker Claire was looking for me. I asked what was up and they weren't sure, but she was carrying a little gift bag. A few minutes later, Claire found me and asked how my vacation was. I was telling them about it, and she cut me off and said she had a very important question to ask. She handed a little gift bag and asked if I would be her best man of honor for her wedding. I thanked her and told her that typically this would traditionally go to a close female relationship. She responded that there was nothing traditional about her wedding, so it was good. I looked over at Laura and Kim, who were both trying to keep from laughing. I again thanked her, congratulated her, and told her that I wasn't interested in being part of her wedding party, and that I would be happier being a guest in the audience. I swear when I said this, it was when we watched her entire demeanor changed and a switch flipped. She went off saying that I have to be in her wedding, and that she doesn't understand why I would say no. I told her that we only knew each other for a short time, and that I had no interest in trying to plan parties, dinners, and shopping trips. She told me I needed to think about it, and she would get back to me later. I told her go for it, but my answer will be the same. She walked away and I looked at Kim and Laura and asked what the ever-loving fresh creepy hell was that. Kim started to laugh and said she didn't know. But saying no like I did might have saved me a lot of headaches in the future. Laura made the comment that she went straight to Bridezilla, and this was a look into what she was going to be like. Claire came back today, however she went with a different approach, and handed me a list of what she wants me to do, and her vision of how she sees things. I asked her why she gave me this and she said that as her man of honor these were my responsibilities. I told her again that I was not going to do any of this. She started again that she needs me to do this and how much fun it was going to be. Then she asked, haven't you ever wanted to be part of something special? I told her I was. I was a nurse. Enter Kim, who could sense that I needed help and told Claire one of her patients needed her help. I told Kim that if this keeps up I might need her help. She said she was already watching it and would intervene if I needed it. What did I miss? We aren't that close. She just transferred down to my unit from a different unit 6 months ago. I had no idea who she was until that point. Laura is saying that she is close in age to me, and she might feel that to be enough of a connection. Did I miss something? When we are asked, are we supposed to automatically gush and jump up and down in excitement? Why is saying no a bad thing? Comments. Comment 1. The poor guy. The way he describes it sounds like he got trauma from his childhood, and that brainless amoeba of a coworker just re-traumatized him with her stomping all over. Comment 2. As a straight male nurse, I get this too. I get to be a friend as long as I am helping you to move, do yard work, fix your car, or try to make your boyfriend jealous. But I am not a friend you are just willing to have a beer with, have over for a barbecue, or just hang out. My wife taught me that I have to firmly say no for the requests for help, unless we are truly friends outside of work. Update 1. Buyer. First, I apologize. I never thought this was going to go as crazy as it did. I want all of you to know I read all of your responses and responded to as many as I was able to. Thank you all for your amazing insights and comments. Many that made me laugh. Which I needed. I have been sick and that really helped to cheer me up. I had to meet with my lawyer today regarding family issues. Editor's note: Oop goes into detail about those issues in other posts on his profile. But they weren't relevant here, so I didn't include them. My neighbor, best friend, coworker Laura took me. I really felt awful and driving wasn't a good idea. We were talking about this on the way and we both were asking a lot of the same questions that all you were asking. The big one was that we were asking about the circumstances of her transfer. She went from med-surg 4W to the ER. That is a huge change. I have to work tomorrow, so we will see what happens. But Laura and I are going to ask Kim about the transfer and raise a couple of other concerns. After I got home from the meeting with my lawyer, I slept for the rest of the day. Many of you asked about if Claire and I hang out outside of work. The answer is no. I really don't know anything about her. I have helped her a few times with patients and different things. But our relationship is 100% purely work-related. That was why I was so surprised that she asked me to do this. That is why I was so surprised that she asked me about being the man of honor. I have a very small friend base, and in all honesty, I like to keep it that way. I really have no interest in being a part of this. I'm not a wedding person. After reading so many Bridezilla stories and hearing about over-the-top weddings, they have become a huge turn-off to me, spending tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars with insane, unrealistic demands that turn people against each other. Why? I would rather use that money and spend that time planning my next trip or vacation. Many people said that I was being used as a token or prop in a wedding. Or a gay best friend. I never really thought about it. I admit that I'm out and proud. But I'm not going to just pretend to be someone's friend just so they can fulfill some kind of fetish they have for wanting to have a gay best friend or some kind of status she feels the need to fulfill. It takes me a lot to get offended, but if this were actually the case, then I would really be rather offended. I was not put on the face of the earth to be someone's play toy. A lot of people have said that maybe she doesn't have a boyfriend. She does. She has brought him in before. If she has any insecurity, I don't understand it. She is attractive, smart, and nosy stuff. So I'm at a loss as to why she is acting like this. A lot of people say go to HR. I'm starting that process with my boss, Kim. She is completely aware of the situation, being with us when all this happened. She has told me that she is watching the situation and will jump in if I need her to. I trust her completely. While Kim and HR can control the situation from the hospital, they can't control the situation from a personal level if she were to maybe follow me home or a situation like that. So I think that covers it all. I wish I could say this is over. But most likely there is more to come. Set your update me. Update 2. I was born into a family where I was referred to as an issue that needed to be dealt with. I lived in the shadows of my sister, who was the child my parents wanted. They wanted one child, which was a girl. That way Dad had his daddy girl and Mom had mommy little princess. Then I came along. Keep in mind that I'm 23, so back then my parents had options but chose to not use any of those options. So instead my parents raised my sister and I was raised by a nanny who even to this day is one of the biggest influences in my life, and I am so grateful for her. She helped me with so much. I finally realized that all these years later that by being referred to as an issue that needed to be dealt with, that they stripped me of my humanity and individuality and self-worth as a person. I think that's why I have worked so hard to establish myself in my career and in my life. As a way to become a person again, and not just be that issue that needed to be dealt with. This past Thursday things came to a head with the bridezilla known as Claire, and the truth came out. My best friend Laura has been sticking close to me when we worked together if Claire was to start something. We weren't sure if she was going to leave it alone or start up again. I was really hoping that it was done. But she had to try once again. I've been sick and I had a busy morning, so I really just wanted a few minutes to go to the bathroom. Grab a quick snack and maybe breath. Claire came up and had her list and asked if I had a few minutes to talk about the wedding planning. I looked at her and told her again no, that I was not interested in being part of her wedding, and that I was not going to help in any way, and she needed to drop the subject and leave me alone. Again, she went into the who thing of how I was going to do this and how much fun it was going to be. Here we go with that line all of you loved the first time. Why in the ever-loving fresh creepy hell is it so important for me to be your man of honor? I'm not interested, and I'm not doing it. It is as exactly as pretty much all of you told me it would be. She was just planning on using me as a token or a play toy. She took all of the fucked up gay stereotypes that are out in society and put them into one sentence. What modern liberal woman isn't going to have a gay bestie on her arm for special events? I felt everything in my stomach move and a wave of nausea come over me, and I felt like I couldn't get to the bathroom fast enough. This pissed Laura off to no end. Laura's really kinda like the overprotective sister that I wish I would have had, and took Claire off to visit our boss Kim and laid it all out. Everything that was said. While I wasn't in on that conversation, Laura and Kim filled me in on what was said. Kim came to check on me and I was still hiding in the bathroom. She knocked on the door and asked if she could come in. I asked her for a bottle of water first. While I was waiting, I realized two things. I realized why I chose to not hang out with her, and why I didn't like her. I couldn't figure out why I didn't like her, just that there was something that gave me. But I realized that I didn't like her because she is a different version of my sister. While Claire is educated and employed, she doesn't care about other people and their feelings. She is like my sister in the sense that if she wants something bad enough, she will figure out how to get it. The second thing I realized was that she did exactly what my parents did to me. She completely dehumanized me and reduced me to an entity. Just kinda turned me into a token or a thing for her. I think the word that best describes it is, I must a play toy. What really gets me is that just like my sister, Claire doesn't think she did anything wrong, and I'm being too sensitive and a delicate snowflake. The next day an emergency meeting was held at work, and Claire is being suspended pending investigation, and a new transfer is being looked into. Kim made the request for her to be terminated. The director of emergency nursing said this was a last resort, but she was going to be looking into options which could be sending her to a new hospital or facility. This didn't go over well with me. I asked what would happen if she did the exact same thing to someone different. She didn't really give me an answer. But she said she still needs to look into a few things, and at this point she is suspended. Anyway. Here it is. I'm still pretty sick and had to work this weekend. If I can, I'll respond. I want to thank everyone for all the amazing support. I am going back to my lawyer to see if he can figure out how to send her a cease and desist letter to make sure she doesn't contact me. I'm heading to bed. Have a good night. Now, for the next story. My ex-fiancée dumped me right before our wedding. 15 years later, she returned, scarred and full of regret, asking for a second chance. She simply went without saying anything or leaving a note soon before our big wedding, and I never received an explanation. Her relatives couldn't understand either. She disappeared without a trace, leaving me and everyone else in the dark. Despite the fact that we had spent high school and college together, she didn't come back to me. Her parents had to inform me that she didn't want me around and had no plans to return. I never understood why she did it, but I was forced to honor her demands. Since she stopped communicating with everyone, I could only assume that she suffered a mental breakdown. I've battled the unsolved questions ever since, even though we were both young and still figuring life out. Then she suddenly wants to meet up and DMs me on Facebook. Anger, anxiety, optimism and despair are all over me after all these years. I'm still attracted to her. Her Facebook profile makes me miss her, but I'm not sure if I could bring her back. She is unmarried and even more gorgeous than before. I'm torn. She says it's preferable to talk about it face to face, but she won't elaborate on why she left. All I can infer from her Facebook posts is a great deal of regret, talks about loneliness, feeling weak and leading a shameful existence. It's annoying. I should not have anything to do with her after she abandoned me, but the truth is that I couldn't stop thinking about her. What ought I to do? Should I confront her, ghost her back, or see where we might go with this meeting? TLDR, after more than 15 years, my ex-fiancée DMs me on Facebook and asks to go on a date. She abandoned me prior to our wedding, so I haven't spoken to her since. Important remarks. Wow, OP, that's difficult. It's been 16 years. Would you find closure you never got, or would seeing her set you back after all this time? OP, I'm not sure. All I want is closure. I believed she had cheated on me for a long time, but based on what her family and some friends told me, it appeared to be more of a mental breakdown. She was anxious about finals and her profession, and she was afraid about the wedding. She eventually made a comeback after ghosting everyone, but I was never involved. I've been thinking about her constantly. You should try to get closure by meeting her, but don't go in expecting her to return. You may not feel the same way about her today, but you do feel something for the person you knew. It's a long time to be abandoned like that. 16 years. Her motivations for contacting me after all this time seem dubious to me. Avoid thinking about her too much. OP, what would be her motivation? She wasn't pregnant when she abandoned me, and I don't have any money or children. The disappearance was completely unexpected. She simply disappeared and never returned to school. To be honest, I think something went wrong. Revision. That was something then. At least I had closure. We sat and chatted outside the cafe where we met. Her severely scarred arms and the intense pain imprinted on her face caught my attention right away. In summary, she acknowledged that she had intended to end the relationship long before the wedding but had been too cowardly and weak to advocate for herself. Everything caused her to have a total nervous breakdown. She felt unable to defend herself and was fed up with being forced to do things she didn't want to do. She was upset with her family for forcing her into a degree she didn't desire and for pressuring her to get married and start a family. She also felt angry at herself for lacking the guts to speak up. We both agreed that nothing she did was justified. I put her on the spot when I proposed to her for the first time in public. She wanted to refuse, but she couldn't risk hurting me. She was correct, I made all of her decisions. Back then, I was a very different person. I was self-centered, and she was submissive, just following the crowd without advocating for herself. I frequently muffled her speech, preventing her from developing or becoming her own person. Everything culminated at one point and she suffered a total mental collapse. The only person she ever trusted, her best friend, advised her to flee her issues. She claimed that the only thing she knew how to do was to flee. Her life took a turn for the worse. She didn't say what she had done, but she ended up in prison for a while after being homeless for a few years after being evicted by her best friend's husband. Since her release almost a year ago, she has been making efforts to improve her life. She ultimately got in touch with me, got a job, and reconnected with her parents. We both agreed that there isn't a future for us. We now live far apart and are two different persons who have nothing in common. She doesn't demand forgiveness or justify her actions. She is disgusted and ashamed of what she did. I just forgiven her because I wanted to be furious but couldn't. After saying our goodbyes and shaking hands, it's likely that we won't see each other again. It's heartbreaking. At last, she and I were able to get the closure we sought. A weight seems to have been lifted. I now realize that we will never have a future together. However, I'm also upset because it's really over. It was all for nothing, all these years of hope. Not many people can say that, but in the end this is an ending, and I've finally found closure. Should I trust her story? I do indeed. And is it really important now, even if she is full of it? She has always struck me as being very meek and weak-willed. When things get too tough, she usually just follows everyone's instructions and flees. Because she is too frail to deal with her issues, she avoids them. Her family was the usual tiger parents who deny their troubled child, so I guess it makes sense that they wouldn't tell me anything about her. TLDR, if it ends well, everything is okay. Finally, our relationship is over, and we can both move on. Important remarks. However, her companion ought to have been the one to notice it. Her companion acted as a facilitator. All of us were. The person who urged her to run was her friend. Anything was all up to her, of course. No one made her do anything. However, I might have anticipated it if I hadn't disregarded her issues and had instead been more involved in her life. But it is what it is. Wait a second, OP, where did you find an open cafe? Asterisk. It's partially open. We sat in the parking lot and ordered takeout. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The proposal shouldn't come as a surprise. You should be fully informed before proceeding. At some point, talk about it as something you both desire. If the other person isn't prepared, dropping it at random puts a lot of pressure on them. In actuality, she was correct. In order to ensure that she wouldn't say no, I purposefully proposed in public. All I could think of was myself. I never thought she was unhappy or that a public proposal may make her uncomfortable. You had a good ending, but she didn't. You seem to have contributed to her issues at the time. Have you shown regret for how you handled her? Did you make amends or provide assistance? To be honest, I felt horrible. Because I just wasn't there for her, I contributed to her anxiety and sorrow. I was prone to taking her for granted. She didn't want to hurt me, so she wanted to end the relationship. She believed that being married to me wouldn't be all that horrible. However, she simply broke. The idea of being in a lie-based, loveless marriage became too much. With a snap, she fled. I did love her, but to be honest, I wouldn't have been so oblivious to her needs if I really loved her. I could have liked the idea of her more than I actually loved her. This is forcing me to examine myself closely. Now to the next story, story 2. I get uninvited from my brother's wedding, then get harassed by his family for not caring enough. Original post. This whole thing is so weird. I, 27 am gay. I came out at 16 and my parents told me they would always love me, but to not mention it to my older brother who I'll call Brick, then 19 30 now. When I was confused and asked why, they said that Brick had expressed some awful opinions about gay people. I limited talking to Brick until I moved out at 18, which wasn't much of a problem because we were never close. I went to uni, got a good job, and an awesome boyfriend, 28M, in my home city. Me and my boyfriend Angel live a peaceful life. Peaceful until a few days ago when I got a call from my brother. I was concerned that Brick was calling me, as we have never messaged before, just had each other's numbers for emergency purposes. I picked up because maybe there was some emergency happening. He opened the call with an annoyed, "Hey man," and I knew something was up. He said he was getting married to his fiancée Yen, 24F, next year. I didn't even know he had a girlfriend. I was like, "That's great, Brick," and asked some boring wedding things that he begrudgingly answered. He then told me invites were being sent out in a couple weeks, and that I could bring a +1. Here's where I made the mistake that started this mess. Without thinking like an idiot, I said, "Cool, I'll bring my boyfriend." Major mess up. Brick immediately started yelling insults down the line, screaming that he wouldn't have an FF slur at his wedding. I didn't say anything and just hung up. I was rattled by hearing those words from my own brother's mouth, even though I knew his feelings about people like me. I told Angel, and he comforted me, ordering in my favorite restaurant and watching movies with me, which was awesome. We went to bed later and I felt alright the next day. I sent my parents a message that Brick invited me and uninvited me from his wedding pretty much in the same breath, and went on my way to work, not a clue of the crapstorm waiting for me when I got off. When I turned my phone on again after my shift, it was blowing up. Messages and calls from my parents and relatives galore asking me what the F happened. I phoned my parents back when I got home and gave them the rundown of what happened and said I honestly didn't care because it's not like Brick would be coming to my wedding anyways. My parents immediately chastised me for my obvious disinterest and disregard of my brother's life, and told me I should be apologizing to him for bringing my personal life into his wedding. What? I basically told my parents to screw off and have been getting bombarded with messages from relatives to apologize to my brother and get my invite reinstated, and apologize to my parents for disrespecting them, but I really don't want to. Angel's reassuring me that I did nothing wrong, but it's still nagging me. AAETA, relevant comment. OK_number_4988. Why did your brother sound annoyed at the beginning of the call? Did he already know? Or was he being forced to invite you by your parents? Seems weird. OOP, he's never been my biggest fan, honestly. We were very different as kids, like polar opposites, and he didn't like that. Very on brand for him. He definitely didn't know I was gay before the call. My parents have kept it very under wraps for years. In terms of if he was being forced to invite me by my parents, I really have zero clue. Update post. My OG post got locked was removed per some misunderstanding/confusion with the AITA mods while trying to post this update, but I'll just post it on my page here without an r/, if anyone wants to see it. Y'all have really opened my eyes on a lot of issues in my family. I apologize for only replying to a few comments. There's just so many of you. Big shout out to all the people who gave compliments to Angel. I showed him this post last night and he thanks you all. I've been showing him lots of love because he really is an angel. And to the people calling this fake, AI, cliche and whatnot, I hate to break it to you all, but this is just my life. It sounds cliche because this is the sort of all too real thing that happens to many people in the community. Just move along if you want to say that stuff, because you're honestly just wasting your time. One of two things I would also like to address is people questioning me about thinking I could possibly be the AH in this situation, and all I can say is that when you have a mass of people telling you you're wrong for what you did, it's hard to not maybe believe them just a little bit, no matter how absurd it is. Second thing, for people wondering how no one in the family knew I was gay, I really was never am not close with my extended family, as they all live in different provinces, and my immediate family never traveled. We really just send each other holiday and birthday messages and have brief conversations whenever those are sent, and I just never had the urge to come out to them. Anyways, on to the update. I decided I didn't want to let this sit for any longer. I took a day off work, and I added my parents, Brick, and all the family that messaged and called me into one big group chat, per one advice I saw here. I laid out everything that went down to them, in case they were told a different story by my parents and brother. I told them that I was going NC with my parents and Brick no matter what, and if they didn't apologize and realize what they did wrong, or I cut them off too. I turned my phone off and continued on without it for the rest of the day. Once I turned my phone on again, I had lots of messages from them. My parents were outraged, and Brick said nothing. Some of my extended family apologized and told me that my parents just told them I was mean to Brick about some of his wedding plan choices, which got me uninvited. Still trying to wrap my head around how stupid that is. Seriously think my parents might be Neanderthals. Anyways, the real story made others even more angry and more insistent that I apologize, and they were promptly blocked. I didn't answer any of my parents' texts, calls, and blocked them. I feel like I have a weight off my shoulders. I'm not concerned about my parents showing up at our apartment, as they moved away from my city last year. Me and Angel are planning a lovely trip, per advice of a lot of people that we thought was great, to France to visit his family during when the wedding will be taking place, which I'm very excited for. I've heard nothing but good things about them. This will most likely be my only update on this post, and I thank you all for your support.